Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the starship Horizon's Edge, watching the endless stars through the main screen. After 3 years of traveling through deep space, they had finally reached something incredible. A massive structure floated in the darkness ahead of them, bigger than any moon they had ever seen. "What is that thing?" asked Dr. Lisa Grant, the ship's scientist who studied alien life. She pressed her face against the viewing window, her eyes wide with wonder. "I have no idea," Jake replied, his voice filled with amazement. "Pete, can you scan it?" Chief Engineer Pete Collins worked quickly at his control station. His fingers moved across the buttons and screens. "Captain, this thing is huge. It's made of materials I've never seen before. The energy readings are off the charts." Navigator Amy Stone looked up from her position. "Sir, I'm picking up movement near the structure. Multiple ships approaching." Our location. Jake felt his heart beat faster. This was it. After years of searching, they had finally found proof that humans were not alone in the universe. "All hands prepare for first contact. This is what we trained for." The alien ships came closer. They were beautiful and terrifying at the same time. The ships seemed to be made of liquid metal that flowed and changed shape as they moved. They had no visible engines, but they glided through space like dancers in the wind. "Captain," Amy said, her voice shaking slightly, "they're surrounding us." Jake could see it too. The alien vessels had formed a circle around the horizon's edge. They were trapped, but Jake tried to stay calm. "Open communication channels. Let's try to talk to them." Before anyone could respond, the main screen filled with light. When it cleared, Jake found himself looking at something that made his blood run cold. The being on the screen was tall and elegant, with skin that seemed to glow with its own light. Its eyes were like stars, and when it spoke, its voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Primitive creatures," the being said, its voice filled with amusement. "You dare to enter our domain without permission. I am Vexthul, High Deity of the Zephyrian Empire. You will identify yourselves." Jake stepped forward, trying to show confidence he didn't feel. "I am Captain Jake Morrison of the human starship Horizon's Edge. We come in peace, seeking to make contact with other intelligent species." Vexthul laughed, and the sound made everyone on the bridge shiver. "Humans, how interesting. Another species of insects that thinks it can fly among the gods." "We're not insects," Dr. Grant said, stepping beside Jake. "We're explorers. We're here to learn." The alien's glowing eyes focused on her. "Learn? You will learn your place soon enough. But first, you will witness the price of defying the gods." The screen changed, showing another part of space. Jake saw a planet surrounded by different alien ships. These ships were smaller and looked damaged, as if they had been fighting for a long time. "The Kethver," Vexthul explained. "Another species that forgot their place. They believed they could challenge the divine order. Watch and learn what happens to those who oppose us." Jake and his crew watched in horror as the Zephyrian ships moved toward the planet. The defenders tried to fight back, but their weapons seemed to have no effect. The Zephyrian vessels simply absorbed the energy blasts or deflected them with invisible barriers. Then something impossible happened. The Zephyrian ships began to change the planet itself. Mountains moved like waves on an ocean. Cities rose into the air, twisted and reshaped, then crashed back down. The planet's surface flowed like water, swallowing the defending ships. "My God," whispered Pete Collins. "They're moving the planet like it's made of clay." In minutes, it was over. The Kethver resistance was destroyed. Their planet was reshaped into something new, with strange geometric patterns covering its surface. The surviving Kethver ships fled into deep space. Vexthul appeared on the screen again. "This is the power of the gods. This is what awaits any who challenge us." His star-like eyes seemed to look directly at Jake. "You humans interest us? Your species shows promise as servants." "Servants?" Jake asked, his anger rising. "We're not looking to serve anyone." "You will serve or you will be destroyed," Vexthul replied calmly. "But we are merciful gods. We will give your species a chance to prove your worth. Return to your world." Tell your leaders that the Zephyrian Empire claims dominion over Earth. You have one solar cycle to surrender and accept our rule. If you refuse, your planet will share the fate of the Kethver. Lieutenant Commander Ben Hayes, the ship's diplomatic officer, stepped forward. Wait, surely we can discuss this. There must be some way to reach an agreement that benefits both our species. Vexil's expression didn't change. There is nothing to discuss. Gods do not negotiate with insects. You have received our mercy by being allowed to carry this message. Do not mistake mercy for weakness. The communication ended and the alien ships began to move away. Jake felt relief wash over him as the Zephyrian vessels disappeared into the darkness, but the fear remained. Captain, Amy said quietly, should we follow them? Try to learn more about their technology? Jake shook his head. No, we need to get home. Earth needs to know what's coming. As the Horizon's Edge began its journey back to Earth, Jake stared out at the stars. They had come looking for friends among the stars and found gods instead. Gods who saw humans as nothing more than insects to be crushed or enslaved. How long until we reach Earth? He asked Amy. At maximum speed, 11 months, she replied. Jake closed his eyes. 11 months to cross the void between stars. Would it be enough time for Earth to prepare for war against beings who called themselves gods? Could humanity find a way to fight enemies who could reshape planets with their thoughts? He looked at his crew. Lisa was already working on her analysis of the alien technology they had witnessed. Pete was checking their engines, making sure they could reach maximum speed. Amy was plotting the fastest course home. Ben was preparing. His diplomatic reports they were just 5 humans in a small ship, carrying news that would change everything. Earth was about to face its greatest challenge, and Jake Morrison prayed they would be ready. The stars watched silently as the human ship raced toward home, carrying a message of coming war with gods who had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood in the command center deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, watching the massive screens that showed Earth's defense preparations. It had been 11 months since Captain Morrison and his crew returned with their terrifying news. 11 months of the most intense preparation in human history. Status report, Kate ordered, her voice steady despite the fear in her chest. All major cities have been evacuated to underground shelters, reported Colonel Sam Turner, the Marine officer in charge of ground defense. Our orbital defense platforms are in position, though I doubt they'll do much good against enemies who can move planets. Dr. Ryan Clark, the scientist leading the technology research team, looked up from his computer screens. Admiral, we've made some progress understanding the energy signatures Morrison's crew recorded. The Zephyrian technology operates on quantum frequencies we've never seen before, but there might be patterns we can exploit. Kate nodded, but her attention was drawn to the main screen. Are those the ships? Everyone in the command center turned. To look, high above Earth, dark shapes were appearing in space. They seemed to come from nowhere, materializing like shadows given form. Within hours, massive vessels hung in orbit around the planet, blocking out the sun in many regions. My God, whispered Commander Alex Rodriguez, who had been training special forces units for months. They're enormous. Each one must be the size of a city. On the surface, people around the world looked up to see the alien ships. The vessels were beautiful and terrifying, made of the same flowing metal that Morrison had described. They pulsed with internal light, and strange energy fields surrounded them like halos. Then something impossible happened. The city of New York began to rise into the air. Kate watched in horror as the entire city, from the tallest skyscrapers to the subway tunnels below, lifted off the ground. 8 million people screamed as their home floated a mile above the earth. But the aliens held it steady, keeping every building, every street, every person exactly where they belonged. They're not hurting anyone, Dr. Clark said, his voice filled with amazement and terror. They're just showing us what they can do. After 10 minutes, New York was gently lowered back to the ground. Not a single building was damaged. Not one person was hurt. The message was clear. The aliens could do whatever they wanted, and humans were powerless to stop them. The same demonstration happened in cities around the world. London, Tokyo, Moscow, Sydney. Each city was lifted into the air and then carefully returned to its place. The aliens were showing mercy, proving they were gods who chose not to destroy. Then the broadcasts began. Every television, every radio, every computer screen on Earth showed the same image. Vexthal appeared, his glowing form filling screens across the planet. When he spoke, his voice was translated into every human language at once. "People of Earth," he said, his star-like eyes seeming to look directly at each person watching. "I am Vexthal, high deity of the Zephyrian Empire. Your species has been chosen to serve the divine order that has ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. Kate felt sick as she watched world leaders prepare to surrender. President Johnson was already drafting a statement of submission. The Prime Minister of Britain was calling for immediate negotiations. Leaders across the globe were ready to bow to these self-proclaimed gods, but not everyone was ready to give up. In the command center, Kate looked at her team of soldiers and scientists. "We're not surrendering," she said quietly. "Whatever these things are, they're not gods. Gods don't need to threaten people to get worship." Colonel Turner nodded. "What are your orders, Admiral?" "We form a resistance. We study these aliens, find their weaknesses, and we fight back." Meanwhile, in a small town in Montana, Dr. Lisa Grant was watching the alien broadcasts with a group of other survivors from the Horizon's Edge mission. She had returned to Earth as a hero, but now she felt helpless as the world prepared to surrender. "There has to be something we can do," she said to Pete Collins, who had been working with Earth's top engineers to understand alien technology. "Maybe there is," Pete replied. "I've been studying the recordings we made of their ships. The energy patterns aren't random. They follow specific rules, like a computer program." Captain Jake Morrison, who had been meeting with military leaders around the world, joined them. "What are you thinking, Pete?" "I'm thinking that anything that follows rules can be broken," Pete said. "We just need to figure out what those rules are." Young engineer Lucy Adams, who had been working on Earth's defense systems, looked up from her tablet. "I've been analyzing the city lifting demonstrations. The aliens use some kind of force field to move objects, but I noticed something interesting. When they lifted New York, there was a slight delay between when they activated their power and when the city actually moved." "A delay?" Dr. Grant asked. "Like they need time to scan and analyze what they're moving," Lucy explained. "Maybe their technology isn't as instant as it looks. Maybe it has limits." Jake felt a spark of hope. "Keep working on that. If their technology has limits, we can find ways to exploit them." Over the following days, the resistance began to form. Admiral Sullivan used her military connections to create a secret network of soldiers, scientists, and engineers who refused to surrender. Colonel Turner began training special forces, units in guerrilla warfare tactics. Dr. Clark worked with the world's top scientists to develop new weapons based on their understanding of Zephyrian technology. The aliens, meanwhile, began establishing their rule. They built massive temples in major cities where humans were expected to come and worship. They appointed human leaders who would serve as their representatives. They made it clear that Earth was now part of their empire, but they also made a crucial mistake. They assumed that humans would be like every other species they had conquered. They expected immediate submission and worship. They didn't understand that humans had a long history of fighting against impossible odds. In hidden bunkers and secret laboratories around the world, the resistance grew. Jake Morrison traveled between safe houses, coordinating with other resistance cells. Dr. Grant worked with alien technology experts to understand their enemies' weaknesses. Lucy Adams developed new theories about how to disrupt alien force fields. The Zephyrians had conquered hundreds of worlds and enslaved thousands of species. They had ruled the galaxy for 10 millennia without serious challenge. They called themselves gods, and for 10,000 years no one had dared to disagree, but they had never faced humans before. They had never encountered a species that responded to the impossible by asking, "How do we make it possible?" They had never met beings who looked at gods and saw only powerful bullies who needed to be stopped. as the resistance grew stronger. Admiral Sullivan prepared for the fight of humanity's life. The aliens might have technology that seemed like magic, but humans had something the Zephyrians had forgotten. After 10,000 years of easy victories, the desperate courage of people who refused to bow to false gods. The war for Earth's freedom was about to begin. The night sky above Chicago glowed with alien light as Gary White crouched behind a pile of rubble, checking his equipment one last time. The frequency disruptor strapped to his back hummed quietly, a device that Dr. Clark had built based on Lucy Adams' theories about Zephyrian technology weaknesses. "Remember," whispered Colonel Turner through Gary's earpiece, "this is just a test. Get in, plant the data collector, and get out. We need to know if our theories are right." Gary nodded, even though Turner couldn't see him. Around him, 5 other resistance fighters waited in the shadows. They were about to attempt something no species had done in 10,000 years: attack a Zephyrian facility. The alien temple rose above them like a mountain of living metal. Strange symbols glowed along its walls, and energy fields shimmered around its base. Inside, Gary knew human collaborators were worshipping the aliens while Zephyrian guards watched with amusement. "Sergeant Baker, you're with me," Gary said quietly to the soldier beside him. Tom Baker was a tough Marine who had volunteered for this mission knowing he might not survive. "Ready when you are," Tom replied, gripping his modified rifle. The weapon had been upgraded with Dr. Clark's frequency emitters. Though no one knew if it would actually work against the aliens, they moved forward through the ruins of what had once been a shopping district. The Zephyrians had reshaped this part of the city to build their temple, turning buildings into flowing sculptures that hurt to look at. Everything felt wrong, as if the laws of physics had been twisted into new shapes. As they approached the temple's outer wall, Gary activated his disruptor. The device sent out waves of energy tuned to interfere with Zephyrian technology. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the energy field around the temple flickered and went dark. "It's working," Gary whispered into his radio. "The field is down." Back in the underground command center, Admiral Sullivan watched the mission through satellite feeds. Dr. Grant stood beside her, monitoring the energy readings from Gary's equipment. "The frequency disruption is holding," Dr. Grant reported, "but it's not stable. They have maybe 10 minutes before the aliens adapt." Gary and his team moved quickly through the gap in the temple's defenses. Inside, they found something that made them all stop and stare. The temple wasn't just a building, it was alive. The walls pulsed like a heartbeat, and strange lights flowed through veins of metal that looked like blood vessels. "What is this place?" asked one of the other fighters, a young woman named Sarah Lopez. "It's not just a temple," Gary realized. "It's part of them. The whole building is connected to their bodies somehow." They moved deeper into the structure, following the layout that resistance spies had provided. The central chamber contained a massive column of flowing energy that reached from floor to ceiling. Around it, human worshippers knelt in rows while 3 Zephyrian guards floated nearby. The guards were beautiful and terrible. Their skin glowed with inner light, and their eyes were like stars. They moved without touching the ground, surrounded by halos of energy that bent light around them. "There," Gary pointed to a control panel near the energy column, "that's where I need to plant the data collector." Tom Baker raised his modified rifle. "I'll cover you. If those things try to stop you, we'll find out if our weapons work." Gary ran toward the control panel while Tom and the other fighters spread out to cover him. The human worshippers looked up in confusion as the resistance fighters moved through the chamber. Some tried to warn the guards, but it was too late. Gary reached the control panel and began connecting his data collector. The device would record everything about the temple's energy systems, giving the resistance crucial information about Zephyrian technology. Then one of the guards noticed them. The alien turned toward Gary, its star-like eyes widening in surprise. For 10,000 years, no primitive species had dared to enter a Zephyrian temple with weapons. The guard raised its hand, and energy began to gather around its fingers. Tom Baker fired his rifle. The modified weapons sent out a burst of frequency-disrupted energy that struck the guard in the chest. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the alien's glow flickered and it stumbled backward. "They can be hurt," Tom shouted. "The weapons work." But the guard was already recovering. Its glow returned, brighter than before, and it let out a sound like thunder. The other guards turned toward the humans, their beautiful faces twisted with rage. "How dare you?" one of them said, its voice echoing through the chamber. "How dare insects touch the divine?" Gary finished connecting his data collector and ran back toward his team. "Got it. Let's get out of here." The guards attacked with beams of pure energy that cut through stone and metal like paper. The human worshippers screamed and ran for the exits. Gary's team fought back with their modified weapons, but they were badly outnumbered. "The disruptor is failing," Sarah Lopez called out. "The field is coming back up." Tom Baker turned to Gary. "Go. Get that data back to the base. We'll hold them off." "I'm not leaving you," Gary protested. "That's an order," Tom replied, firing his rifle at an approaching guard. "This mission is bigger than any of us." Gary ran toward the exit as the battle continued behind him. He could hear Tom and the others fighting desperately against the aliens. The sound of energy weapons filled the air. Along with human shouts and alien roars of rage, he made it outside just as the temple's defenses came back online. The energy field snapped back into place, trapping his teammates inside. Gary could only watch as flashes of light filled the temple windows. When it was over, silence fell over the ruins. Gary's radio crackled with static, but no voices came through. Tom Baker and the others were gone, but their sacrifice had not been in vain. 3 days later, in the Resistance Command Center, Dr. Grant finished analyzing the data Gary had collected. Captain Morrison and Admiral Sullivan watched as she displayed her findings on the main screen. "This changes everything," Dr. Grant said, her voice filled with excitement. "The Zephyrians aren't gods. They're not even naturally powerful beings. They're an ancient species that merged with advanced nanotechnology millions of years ago." "Nanotechnology?" Morrison asked. "Tiny machines that live in their bodies and give them their powers," Dr. Grant explained. "But here's the important part. The machines can be disrupted." Tom Baker's rifle worked because it interfered with the nanobots in that guard's body. Admiral Sullivan leaned forward. "What does this mean for our fight?" "It means they can be killed," Dr. Grant replied. "We just need better weapons and more knowledge about how their technology works." Lucy Adams, who had been working on weapon designs, spoke up. "I can build something better than those rifles. If we know how their nanobots work, we can design weapons specifically to disrupt them." Meanwhile, in his floating palace above Earth, Vexthal stood before a wounded guard. It was the first time in 1,000 years that a Zephyrian had been injured by a primitive species. "How is this possible?" Vexthal asked, his star-like eyes blazing with anger. "The humans have learned to disrupt our neural nanobots," the guard replied. "Their weapons cause temporary system failures." "Temporary," Vexthal repeated. "So we are still superior." "Yes, High Deity, but they drew blood. They proved we can be hurt." Vexthal was quiet for a long moment. In 10,000 years of rule, no species had ever wounded a Zephyrian. The psychological impact was enormous. If word spread that the gods could bleed, other species might find the courage to rebel. "Double the guards on all temples," Vexthal ordered, "and prepare the punishment fleets. These humans must be taught that challenging the gods has consequences." But down in the hidden bunkers of the Resistance, something had changed. Tom Baker's sacrifice had proven that the aliens could be hurt. The data he died to collect had revealed their greatest secret. They were not gods, just very old beings with very advanced technology. The first crack had appeared in the Zephyrian Empire's foundation. Soon that crack would become a flood that would wash away 10,000 years of false divinity. The Resistance had taken its first step toward proving that gods could bleed. Lucy Adams wiped sweat from her forehead as she put the finishing touches on humanity's most important weapon. The device looked simple, like a large backpack with glowing tubes, but she knew it could change the course of the war. She called It's the equalizer. Are you sure this will work? Asked Commander Rodriguez, watching Lucy test the device in the underground laboratory. Tom Baker proved their nanobots can be disrupted, Lucy replied, adjusting the power settings. This just does it better and over a much larger area? When activated, it should shut down every Zephyrian within 100 meters. Dr. Grant looked over the technical readings. The power requirements are enormous. How long will it last? Maybe 5 minutes, Lucy admitted. But 5 minutes of fighting mortals instead of gods might be enough. Admiral Sullivan entered the lab with urgent news. We've made contact with other resistance groups. Captain Morrison's mission to the outer colonies was successful. He's found allies. On the bridge of the rebuilt Horizon's Edge, Jake Morrison stood beside an alien creature that looked like a cross between a lizard and a bird. This was Thexme, one of the few surviving Kethver military leaders. Your species has done something remarkable, Thexmore said, his voice coming through a translation device. In 10,000 years, no one has wounded a Zephyrian. Word is spreading throughout the galaxy. What do you mean? Jake asked. Hidden resistance cells on a dozen worlds have heard about your attack on the temple. They're asking if it's true that the gods can bleed. Jake felt a chill of excitement. Are they willing to fight? They're willing to try, Thexmore replied. But they need proof that humans can teach them how to hurt the gods? Back on Earth, the resistance was about to provide that proof. Commander Rodriguez led a team of 20 fighters, each carrying one of Lucy's new weapons. They targeted a Zephyrian patrol ship that had landed in the ruins of Detroit. The ship was beautiful and terrible, its flowing metal hull reflecting the morning sun. 3 Zephyrian guards stood beside it, their glowing forms seeming to bend. Light around them. They were examining the remains of human resistance fighters who had attacked them the week before. Remember, Rodriguez whispered to his team, wait for my signal. We hit them all at once with the disruptors, then move in with conventional weapons while they're vulnerable. The fighters spread out in a circle around the aliens. Rodriguez raised his hand, then dropped it. 20 disruptor weapons fired at once, filling the air with waves of energy designed to shut down Zephyrian nanotechnology. The effect was immediate and shocking. The 3 guards stumbled as their glow flickered and died. For the first time in millions of years, they felt truly mortal. Their star-like eyes went wide with fear and confusion. Now! Rodriguez shouted. The human fighters charged forward with rifles and explosives. The Zephyrians tried to use their powers, but the disruptors kept their nanobots from working properly. Instead of floating like gods, they had to run on the ground like any other creature. The battle was fierce but brief. Without their technological advantages, the Zephyrians were no match for trained human soldiers. When it was over, all 3 aliens lay dead, their bodies no longer glowing with divine light. We did it, breathed one of the fighters, staring at the fallen gods. We actually killed them. Rodriguez activated his radio. Base, this is Strike Team Alpha. Mission accomplished. The gods are dead. The news spread quickly through the resistance network. Within hours, every rebel cell on Earth knew that humans had found a way to kill Zephyrians. But the news traveled even further than that. In the hidden caves of the Altair system, Kethver survivors received the message. On the mining worlds of the Rigel colonies, enslaved Gorati workers whispered the impossible news. Throughout the galaxy, species that had bowed to the Zephyrians for thousands of years learned that the gods could die. Vexthal felt the change. Immediately, standing in his palace above Earth, he sensed the shift in the galaxy's spiritual energy. Fear was replacing worship. Doubt was growing where once there had been absolute faith. High Deity, one of his advisors reported, we're receiving distress signals from outposts throughout the Empire. Slave species are beginning to rebel? Impossible, Vexthal replied, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. They would never dare challenge us. They have dared, my lord. The humans have shown them that we can be killed. Vexthal's star-like eyes blazed with rage. Then we will remind them why they should fear us. Prepare the punishment fleets. We will destroy every rebel world as an example to the others. But even as he gave the orders, Vexthel felt something he had not experienced in 10,000 years. Doubt. The humans had done more than kill a few guards. They had shattered the myth of Zephyrian invincibility on Earth. Dr. Clark was analyzing the bodies of the dead Zephyrians when he made another crucial discovery. "Admiral," he called to Sullivan, "you need to see this." Sullivan looked at the scanner readings Clark was showing her. "What am I looking at?" "The nanobots in their bodies aren't just technology," Clark explained. "They're connected to something else. Look at these energy signatures." On the screen, Sullivan could see streams of data flowing from the dead aliens to somewhere far away. "They're networked?" "More than that," Clark said excitedly. "I think their power comes from massive energy collectors scattered throughout the galaxy. If we could find and destroy those collectors, we could cut off their power source." "Admiral." Sullivan felt her heart race. "How do we find them?" "We follow the energy streams," Clark replied. "But we'd need a ship capable of reaching other star systems." Sullivan smiled. "I think Captain Morrison can help with that." Meanwhile, on the horizon's edge, Jake Morrison was meeting with representatives from 6 different alien species. The ship's conference room was crowded with beings that looked like nothing from Earth, but they all shared the same desperate hope. "The humans have given us a gift," said a creature that looked like a walking tree. "They have shown us that the gods can be killed, but we need more than weapons. We need a plan." Vekmar nodded his lizard-like head. "The Zephyrians have ruled through fear for so long that we forgot how to fight. But humans never forgot. They can teach us." "What do you propose?" Jake asked. "A coordinated strike," Vekmar replied. "Not just against Zephyrian outposts, but against the source of their power. We know they draw energy from ancient machines built throughout the galaxy. If we can destroy those machines, we can level the playing field," Jake finished. "Make it a fair fight." One of the other aliens, a being that looked like a giant insect, spoke up. "Our species has legends about these machines. They were built on dead worlds, places where the Zephyrians destroyed entire civilizations that opposed them. A monument to their cruelty," said another alien, "but also their weakness, if we can reach them." Jake felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. Earth's resistance had started something that was spreading across the galaxy. But to finish it, they would need to strike at the heart of the Zephyrian Empire. "We'll need every ship we can get," Jake said. "And we'll need to coordinate attacks across multiple star systems simultaneously." "The Kethver still have warships hidden in the outer systems," Vekmar offered. "They're old, but they still fly." "My people can provide intelligence about Zephyrian installations," said the insect-like being. "We've been watching them for centuries, waiting for a chance to strike back." As the meeting continued, Jake realized that humans had become something they never expected: teachers of rebellion. Species that had been enslaved for millennia were looking to humanity for guidance on how to fight gods. But even as hope grew among the rebels, Vexthel was preparing his response. The Zephyrian punishment. Fleets were already moving toward rebel worlds. The false gods were about to remind the galaxy why they had ruled unopposed for 10,000 years. The war was escalating beyond Earth. Soon, the entire galaxy would be a battlefield where mortals fought gods, and the outcome would determine the fate of countless civilizations. The resistance had proven that gods could bleed. Now they had to prove that gods could die. The Zephyrian home system blazed with the light of 1,000 warships as the largest battle in galactic history began. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the horizon's edge, watching as rebel fleets from dozens of species engaged the enemy forces that had protected the gods for 10,000 years. "Status report," Jake called to his crew as explosions lit up the space around them. "The Kethver fleet is holding the left flank," reported Amy Stone, her hands flying over the navigation controls. "The Garati mining ships are breaking through on the right, but they're taking heavy losses." Dr. Grant looked up from her sensor station. "Jake, the energy readings from the planet's surface are incredible. That collector down there is powering half the Zephyrian fleet." On the planet below, massive towers of crystal and metal reached into the sky, channeling energy from the planet's core and beaming it to Zephyrian ships throughout the galaxy. This was the primary energy collector, the source of power that made. The false gods seemed divine. "Pete, how's our strike team?" Jake asked. Chief Engineer Pete Collins checked his communications equipment. They landed safely, but they're facing heavy resistance. The surface defenses are unlike anything we've seen before. Down on the planet's surface, Lucy Adams crouched behind a fallen Zephyrian defense tower, adjusting her massive equalizer device. Around her, a mixed team of humans and aliens fought desperately to reach the central collector. The landscape looked like something from a nightmare, with twisted metal structures and energy fields that hurt to look at. "How much further?" asked Vekmor, the Kethver leader who had insisted on joining the ground assault. "Half a mile," Lucy replied, checking her scanner. "But that's half a mile through the most heavily defended area in the galaxy." Sergeant Rodriguez, who had survived the attack on the Detroit Patrol, fired his disruptor rifle at an approaching Zephyrian guard. "These things just keep coming." "How many guards does one building need?" "As many as it takes to protect the source of their power," replied Dr. Grant, who had also insisted on joining the mission. "If we destroy this collector, every Zephyrian in the galaxy will lose half their abilities." The team pushed forward through the alien landscape. The very ground beneath their feet pulsed with energy, and the air shimmered with power fields that made breathing difficult. But they kept moving, driven by the knowledge that millions of enslaved beings throughout the galaxy were counting on them. Above them, the space battle raged on. Rebel ships from 100 worlds fought against Zephyrian vessels that moved like living things through the void. The rebels were outnumbered, but they fought with the desperate courage of beings who had nothing left to lose. "Jake," came Vekmor's voice over the radio from the planet's surface, "we're at the outer ring of the collector, but there's something you need to know. Vexthal is here." Jake felt his blood turn cold. "What do you mean he's there?" "He's waiting for us at the collector's core," Vekmor replied. "It's like he knew we were coming." On the planet's surface, the strike team could see the massive central tower that housed the energy collector's core, and standing before it, surrounded by a dozen elite guards, was Vexthal himself. The high deity's form blazed with power, and his star-like eyes seemed to burn with the fury of a dying sun. "So," Vexthal's voice echoed across the twisted landscape, "the insects finally come to challenge the gods directly. How amusing." Lucy Adams stepped forward, her equalizer device humming with power. "You're not gods," she called out. "You're just old bullies with fancy technology." Vexthal laughed, and the sound made the ground shake. "Old? Yes, we are old. We were already ancient when your species was learning to make fire. We have seen the birth and death of 1,000 civilizations. What makes you think you can succeed where they all failed?" Dr. Grant joined Lucy at the front of the group. "Because we know what you really are. You're not divine beings. You're a species that became addicted to your own technology. You've forgotten what it means to be truly alive." "Truly alive?" Vexthal's eyes blazed brighter. "We transcended the limitations of mortality millions of years ago. We became perfect beings, free from death, free from weakness, free from the petty concerns that plague lesser species." "You became prisoners," Dr. Grant replied. "Prisoners of your own nanobots, slaves to your own power. When was the last time you felt real joy, real sadness, real love? You've traded your souls for the ability to play God." For a moment something flickered in Vexthal's eyes, but then his expression hardened. "Enough philosophy. You will not touch the collector. Guards, destroy them." The elite Zephyrian guards moved forward, their forms blazing with power, but Lucy was ready. She activated her massive equalizer device, and waves of disruptive energy washed over the area. The effect was even more dramatic than anyone had expected. Not only did the guards stumble as their nanobots failed, but the entire energy collector began to flicker and dim. The device was so powerful that it was disrupting the ancient machinery itself. "It's working!" Lucy shouted. The collector is shutting down. But Vexel was not affected as much as his guards. His personal nanobots were more advanced, more resistant to disruption. He raised his hands, and bolts of pure energy shot toward the strike team, the humans and their alien allies, scattered, returning fire with their disruptor weapons. The battle was fierce and desperate, with bolts of energy and explosive shells filling the air. But slowly the rebels began to gain ground. Vecmore fought with the fury of someone whose entire species had been nearly destroyed by the Zephyrians. Rodriguez used every guerrilla warfare trick he had learned during months of resistance fighting. Dr. Grant and Lucy worked together to keep the equalizer running while the others provided cover, but it was Pete Collins who made the crucial move. While the others fought the guards, he slipped around to the side of the energy collector and began placing explosive charges at its base. "I'm in position," he called over the radio, "but I need more time to set the charges properly." "You've got it," Rodriguez replied, firing his rifle at an approaching guard. "We'll keep them busy." The battle intensified as more Zephyrian reinforcements arrived. The rebels were outnumbered 10-1, but they fought with the knowledge that the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. Vexthal himself entered the battle, his form blazing with power even as Lucy's equalizer disrupted his abilities. He moved, like lightning, striking at the rebels with bolts of energy that could cut through solid steel. "You cannot win," he shouted as he fought. "Even if you destroy this collector, there are others throughout the galaxy. You cannot destroy them all." "Maybe not," Dr. Grant replied, dodging an energy bolt. "But we can destroy enough of them to level the playing field. We can make this a fair fight." "A fair fight?" Vexthal's laugh was bitter. "There is no such thing. There are only the strong and the weak, the rulers and the ruled. We are your superiors in every way." "No," said a new voice. Jake Morrison had arrived with reinforcements from the space battle above. "You're just another species that forgot what it means to be part of something bigger than yourself." The final assault began. Human soldiers, Kethver warriors, Garati miners, and rebels from a dozen other species charged toward the energy collector. They fought not just for their own freedom, but for the freedom of every enslaved being in the galaxy. Pete Collins finished, setting his charges, and ran toward the others. "Charges are set. We need to get clear." But Vexthal made one last desperate attempt to stop them. He gathered all his remaining power and prepared to unleash an energy blast that would destroy the entire rebel force. Lucy Adams saw what he was doing. Without hesitation, she turned her equalizer to maximum power and aimed it directly at the high deity. The feedback from the device would probably destroy it, but it might be enough to stop him. "Lucy, don't," Dr. Grant shouted. "The device will overload. Someone has to stop him," Lucy replied. She activated the equalizer at full power. The wave of disruptive energy hit Vexthal just as he released his attack. Both energies collided in a blinding flash that lit up the entire planet. When the light faded, both Lucy's device and Vexthal lay motionless on the ground. "Now," Pete shouted. "Everyone get clear!" The explosives detonated, and the ancient energy collector began to collapse. Towers that had stood for millions of years crumbled into dust. The power that had flowed through them for so long flickered and died. Across the galaxy, Zephyrian ships suddenly found themselves operating on backup power. The false gods were still dangerous, but they were no longer invincible. The rebellion had struck at the heart of the Empire, and the gods had finally been proven mortal. 6 months after the destruction of the primary energy collector, Captain Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of the new orbital station above Earth, watching ships from dozens of worlds arrive for the first meeting of the Galactic Liberation Alliance. The sight filled him with wonder and sadness at the same time. Wonder, because he was seeing species from across the galaxy working together as equals for the first time in 10,000 years. Sadness, because Lucy Adams was not there to see it. Her sacrifice had made this moment possible. "Jake," came a familiar voice behind him. He turned to see Dr. Lisa Grant approaching, wearing the blue uniform of the new Alliance Medical Corps. "The delegates are ready for you." Jake nodded and followed her toward the main conference hall. As they walked, he could see the changes that had swept across the galaxy in the past months. The Zephyrian Empire was crumbling as world after world declared independence. Some Zephyrians had fought to the end, refusing to accept that their reign was over. Others had laid down their weapons and asked for forgiveness. The conference hall was filled with beings from hundreds of different worlds. Kethver leaders sat beside human diplomats. Gorati miners talked with representatives from species that Jake had never seen before. At the center of it all sat Admiral Kate Sullivan, who had been chosen to lead the new alliance. "Ladies, gentlemen, and honored beings," Admiral Sullivan began, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "We gather today not as conquerors, but as liberators. Not as masters, but as equals. The age of false gods is over. The age of cooperation begins now." A cheer went up from the assembled delegates. Jake saw tears in the eyes of beings whose species had been enslaved for thousands of years. Freedom was something they had almost forgotten how to hope for. Vekmur, the Kethver leader who had fought beside Jake on the Zephyrian homeworld, stood to speak. "The humans have given us more than victory," he said. "They have given us back our dignity. They showed us that gods can bleed, that tyrants can fall, and that even the smallest species can change the galaxy." But not everyone was celebrating. In a small chamber nearby, a group of Zephyrians sat under guard, waiting to face justice for 10,000 years of oppression. Their leader was Kyleth, one of the few high deities who had survived the rebellion. Unlike Vexthal, Kyleth had not fought to the end. When the energy collectors began falling across the galaxy, she had surrendered and asked to speak with the rebel leaders. Now she sat across from Jake Morrison, her once bright eyes dim with shame. "I want to make amends," Kyleth said quietly. "My people have done terrible things. We told ourselves we were bringing order to the galaxy, but we were really just feeding our own hunger for power." Jake studied her carefully. "What are you proposing?" "Our technology," Kyleth replied. "We will share everything we know. No more secrets, no more advantages. Let all species advance together instead of being held back by artificial limits." Dr. Grant, who was present for the meeting, leaned forward. "What about the other Zephyrians? Will they agree to this?" "Some will," Kyleth admitted. "Others are too proud, too addicted to power. They will have to be stopped. But there are those of us who are tired of being gods. We want to be people." Again, this was the choice that split the remaining Zephyrians. Some, like Kyleth, chose to abandon their claims to divinity and work with the new alliance. Others retreated to distant worlds, gathering their most loyal followers and preparing for a final war against the rebels. Commander Alex Rodriguez, now serving as the alliance's military coordinator, brought updates from across the galaxy. "Most of the major Zephyrian strongholds have fallen," he reported to Admiral Sullivan. "But there are still pockets of resistance. Some of them are using enslaved populations as shields." "What about the energy collectors?" Sullivan asked. 70% destroyed, Rodriguez replied. "The remaining ones are heavily defended, but Dr. Clark thinks he can build larger versions of Lucy's equalizer devices to shut them down from a distance." Meanwhile, on a liberated world in the Vega system, Pete Collins was working with alien engineers to build something that had never existed before, a truly cooperative space station where multiple species could work together as equals. The design incorporated the best ideas from dozens of different civilizations. "The humans have a saying," Pete told his alien co-workers. "Many hands make light work. But I think the galaxy version is even better. Many minds make great wonders." The alien engineers laughed, a sound that Pete had learned meant agreement in their culture. It was amazing how quickly beings from different worlds could learn to work together when they were treated as equals, instead of servants. Back on Earth, Dr. Ryan Clark was fulfilling his promise to build better weapons for the Alliance. But instead of weapons of war, he was building tools of peace. Medical scanners that could work on any species. Communication devices that could translate any language instantly. Terraforming equipment that could make dead worlds bloom with life. Again, Lucy would have loved this. he said to his assistant, a young Kethver scientist named Veltar. She always said technology should bring people together, not drive them apart. The final battles of the Liberation War were fought not on grand battlefields, but in the hearts and minds of enslaved peoples across the galaxy. As news spread that the gods could be defeated, more and more worlds found the courage to rebel. The last major Zephyrian stronghold fell on a cold world near the galactic rim. The remaining false gods, led by a fanatic named Zorthek, had gathered there with the most loyal of their followers. They had enslaved the local population and threatened to destroy the entire planet rather than surrender. Jake Morrison led the final assault personally. Using a fleet of ships crewed by beings from 50 different worlds, the battle was brief but decisive. With their power sources cut off, the Zephyrians could not maintain their technological advantages. They fell like any other mortal beings. When it was over, Zorthek was brought before Jake in chains. "You have won nothing," the fallen god snarled. "Order will collapse without us. The galaxy will tear itself apart." "Maybe," Jake replied. "But at least it will be their choice to make." 1 year after the Liberation War ended, Jake stood in the same place where he had first encountered the Zephyrians. But now, instead of a temple to false gods, the site held a memorial to all the beings who had died fighting for freedom. Lucy Adams' name was carved at the top. Along with Tom Baker and thousands of others, Dr. Grant joined him at the memorial along with Pete Collins and Amy Stone. They were older now, marked by the war they had fought. But they were also proud of what they had accomplished. "Do you think we did the right thing?" Amy asked, looking at the names carved in stone. "I think we did the only thing we could do," Jake replied. "We proved that no one has the right to rule others just because they have better technology." Around them, the galaxy was changing. Trade routes that had been controlled by the Zephyrians for millennia were now open to all species. Worlds that had been strip-mined for resources were being restored. Children from dozens of different species were learning to play together in schools that taught cooperation instead of submission. It was not perfect. There were still conflicts, still problems to solve. Some species struggled with freedom after so many years of slavery. Others tried to take advantage of the chaos to build their own small empires. But these were the problems of free beings, not the suffering of slaves. The age of false gods was over. The age of cooperation had begun. And somewhere in the memorial garden, visitors from across the galaxy left flowers and small gifts to honor the humans who had shown them that gods were just people with better technology. And that better technology belonged to everyone. The galaxy had learned that true divinity was not about power over others, but about the courage to stand up for what was right, even when the odds seemed impossible. That lesson would echo through the stars for generations to come, carried by beings who had once been slaves but now walked free among the endless night.